Take two.
Take two. Ice Cream You Meme podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do, you know the drill. Anyway, I have to do the thing that my brother was doing yesterday, and then I was hitting him every time he did it. Where, we went to the movie, and he was doing the out loud. It's like a Five Nights at Freddy's thing, apparently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I was hitting him because I was like, I thought I was immune to cringe. Stop doing
Yeah. Wait, it was hitting you too hard?
Yeah, but probably it was also because it was my brother, and I just like the sibling instinct of like.
Was it this sound?
You fucking asshole! No, I think that would have been better. It's like the one where like it accompanies the bear guy. It's like. I'll send it to you after.
It's
everyone listening will
like that
appreciate
classical song, like the.
No! Oh my god! No, but it sounds like that.
Okay, yeah.
It might be that. But anyway, yeah, so if you can't tell, I watched Five Nights at Fredward's last night.
How did it hold up for you? How was it?
Okay, do you know anything about Five Nights at Freddy's?
Not willingly. I know.
I also don't know. I watched last year a 2-hour video from Wendy Goon that was like explaining the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. But like you watch it and you're just like, I need sound. And I've seen Germa play it, but like the gist of it to me is like you're a security guard at like a old Chuck E. Cheese ass thing, and you just don't want Charles Entertainment Cheese to kill you, right? And so my sister-in-law has been watching and consuming Five Nights at Freddy's content since like she was very young.
Okay, sure.
Right.
Yeah. Like
for 10 years, so she's very young. And my brother, I think, like has knowledge of it, so they're like really familiar with it. So like my sister-in-law, she's like, it was mid. She definitely said it was mid.
They're tapped into the Freddy's lore.
Yeah, they're tapped in. My brother had fun because my brother's a fun boy. Yeah. He just has fun. And I, coming into this not knowing what's going on, but also knowing that like, okay, the gist is like your security guard. Right. I was like, this is okay. This was okay. But like, I think we have done the show so much that like, I am no longer watching something if it's scary. Like I'm sitting there like, what is the technique? Okay. So you were like that trying to dissect the but not on purpose. Because I was just like, oh, Josh Hutcherson is old now. It's like just like us. I was like, oh, he's great sibling dynamic, you know, the disgruntled older sibling having to take care of their younger sibling kind of thing. And then it's like we talked about on here how like monsters are great when you don't see them that much. Right. And you see them a lot. Yeah. So much so that it sinks in that like these are like okay, for us it would be like you told me Chuck E. Cheese was like attacking people. Right. They're animatronic like monsters, right? They look like it. They're like, so I was like, there was like one scene in particular where like I guess they were like all standing around and like in their like full like thing, and I was like, this is not scary. For sure. This is like funny in like an absurd way that you're starting to realize that like you've seen them so much and it's like it's no longer scary. Like what the fuck is going on? Yeah, I feel like I was like too old for Five Nights at Freddy's when that dropped, because like I think it dropped in like 2014 and I was already kind of like, I don't know if like I'm that scared about like the Chuck E. Cheese concept, like but I've definitely seen like in the last couple of months a lot of like dancing Freddy's like CGI'd, which I think kind of speaks to the mindset of the fandom that like kind of knows it's kind of corny, right? Yeah. And I think it was like, it might be a bit hard to, because I told them, I was like, okay, if I came into this and this was just like an original movie that didn't have like based off of blah, 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 or like inspired by that, I would still, I think, be like, oh, I need something a little bit like a scarier, like animatronic that you don't see that much. Right. Yeah, I mean, they're kind of so iconic at this point, right? Like the look of the Freddy's animatronics that it's like they're gonna show them, like, you know, and that, like in the game, I think that was like the scare too, was like you would see like them like jump at you, right? Like it's very jump scary type shit. Yeah, like you see it for a second. Like I think there was, I don't know if you know this, Matthew Lillard, our boy Shaggy. Oh, nice. Is in this movie, and I love him, and I immediately recognize him, and I was like, okay, Shaggy time. So I was like, okay. And then there were, I think, a few kids there. Okay. But they're probably like my sister-in-law's age. Okay. So like early 20s kid. Yeah. So yeah, they were like parents, taking their kids. So I was like, okay, maybe it's like also like easy to consume for like the parent who's like gonna go and watch this.
Yeah.
And then the kid who is maybe like not remembering everything. And then also now for like the people who have been watching it since like 2014, like Dolly and Ewan's age, who like have the lore and history of it. Yeah, so we were in the car driving home and they're like, oh, so this was not a person here actually, and this is like a smashed up version of like this. And I was just like, okay, damn, that kind of thing, right? And then I think I forgot who said it between the two of them, but it was like it's like apparently like in the game or like in the thing, it's like kind of like gory-ish, but like in the movie it's not like gore or
it's
anything.
Going for like it's a PG-13 film, right?
Yeah,
so it's kind of going for like the younger audience. Yeah.
So I was like, I don't think like, okay, so you're like, you have like a 12-year-old kid you're gonna take to this, like I don't think you're gonna be like, oh, why is it this much, and the kid has to like explain it to you. So I was like, okay. Yeah. Well, I think my sister-in-law was wondering if there's like, because it's also released on Peacock at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was like, is there going to be like a, R-rated cut of this?
I saw that there will not be an R-rated cut.
Yeah. Yeah. So, because then a kid will have access to that too. Right. And then the parent might be like, ugh. But yeah, I think everyone who was in it did a good job at what they had. Like the kid actors were like really good.
Yeah. Did you watch M3 again?
No.
It's another one that's like another PG-13 horror, and like I feel like there's been like some decent ones, like Insidious. I think I remember when that came out. I was like, this is decent for like PG-13. Like it still manages to be kind of scary. I mean, again, I was thinking when I was like probably like 16, 17, so I was like, oh wow, this is early in the horror phase, right?
Yeah.
But then M3 again just felt like they were like holding back so much, where I feel like you can get that sense sometimes with like PG-13 where it's like if this was R-rated they would really go ham here.
Yeah, there's literally like some parts of it where like I think this would have been much nastier if it was not a PG-13 movie, because like the concept of like the animatronics and like their innards like being one of the ways that they can kill people, like that could potentially be like a Disneyland Saw situation, right, Chuck E. Cheese kind of thing. But yeah, it was very interesting. I also was like, oh, this is also probably like COVID filming strats as well, because like you had the 3 adult characters and then the kids, and then like it's very limited amount of like actors, and then like
the CGI animatronics mostly.
Yeah, they're like, and if you're in that suit and you're the actual person, you're in the suit, you're protected from like another person coming close to you. So yeah. So it was, for me, it was an interesting, good watch, and it was definitely something that I'm glad I watched when it was big, because it was like dark for the most part, because nights and Fridays, and my dumb ass. I have 2 pairs of glasses, which is my closer glasses and my faraway glasses, because they're in 2 different colors. I basically watched the whole movie with a yellow filter on it, so my bad to everybody. I saw like the vintage version that will come out in like 20 years.
You're like, this is set in the Middle East? Oh my god, we're using the yellow filters? Yeah.
And then I would take it off and I was like, oh shit. My bad. Yeah. But yeah. So I think you should watch it. It's like it's a good watch. Like you're just sitting down and watch it. Like,
I'm gonna watch it for sure. Yeah. Have you seen Willy's Wonderland?
No, I haven't.
That's like, it came out a couple of years ago. It's a clear knockoff of Five Nights at Freddy's, with Nicolas Cage, but he's silent the entire time, probably because they didn't want to pay him too much.
Oh my god.
But it is like the same concept of like animatronics coming to life and like killing people, but it is like it's definitely an R-rated one. It could be worth watching. I'd be interested in hearing your comparison between the two.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll watch Five Nights at Freddy's, and maybe we can kind of discuss next time like how it measures up, because I guess like the question is how much lore is important in terms of like Willy's Wonderland is just like living animatronics. There's no explanation behind it, where I know FNAF has like a huge lore iceberg.
Yeah. They were talking about like, you and my sister-in-law were talking about like the lore aspect of it, and like what's missing, and then like who's been combined into like a single character, and like who suddenly appears from nowhere, and then like the possibility of like a part 2 or like a series of it kind of thing, which is, I think that could make money, even if it just is ass on like Rotten Tomatoes, because like people are great at like
into it. Yeah, they're like
that kind of thing. So yeah, that's my review of Five Nights at Freddy's, without any context other than like the video game meme.
glowing review. Let's
woo, that kind of thing. I haven't seen Dear David yet because I got stuff, but also it's on Amazon for rent, I think. So I might do that.
Yeah, that might be the
it's
way.
Still October.
Yeah, still there's time.
It's still there. It's available. I won't leave.
Well, shall we get into segments?
Get me out of the way, okay?
First up, we have JD. We gotta
Picture
get like some interesting for you.
Like a DJ JD. Okay. That's my project this weekend is custom DJ. Like what are those called?
I don't know, stings.
Yeah, stings. Right. My brother picked up his trumpet again, so I'm gonna make him trumpet into the Shure mic. But yeah, okay. JD time. POV, you eat shit. Picture this. You're biking home. Picture this, you eat shit.
Okay.
Not that kind, okay? Yeah. Picture this. You're biking home on a rush and you just want to get back to your bed, right? Mm-hmm. When suddenly you eat shit. You pick yourself up from the street and hobble over to your bike, wheels still spinning, and you bend down to pick your bike back up and you see it. Not the clown, but a USB. Unharmed, unscathed, just on the street. You think you ran it over. You're pretty sure you did, but it's in perfect condition. Right? Whatever. You say to yourself, I'll take it home. You get home and a little scuffed and dirty, but curious. What's in this thing? You plug it into your computer and bam. That is the concept of the flash drive by Skeleton Dude 199. Skeleton Dude 199. Okay. In this, we have the basic story of someone finding a USB drive on the ground after eating shit because of it. And the person starts off the story by warning you about doing what they did, saying, quote, "This must be told to all of you as a warning. Learning this the hard way will potentially threaten you and your family. Now is the time to tell you about the flash drive I found in the span of 3 days." Right. It then goes through them plugging in that USB, finding a folder of family photos, and using their Photoshop skills to manipulate the photos, saying, "I was going to screw up every last picture, so when I find them and hand it back to them, they'll be scratching their heads." I thought this was really funny. Mm-hmm. Real edgy right there. Love to see it, right? The character goes through and systematically turns each photo into just sort of a background in a sort of strangely dark way. They kind of like see a photo of a little girl labeled like happy.tiff, which is like, you know, the file. And then the person decides the best course of action is to erase her from the photo and then go, "Goodbye." Out loud, right? The whole section of them like sort of systematically erasing this family from the photos and turning it just into backgrounds is like, have you seen 1 Hour Photo with Robin Williams?
I've not seen 1 Hour Photo, no.
I recommend it because it's one of like, I think my favorite Robin Williams movies because, you know, everyone's like, Robin Williams, comedy. Right.
Robin Williams drama, I feel like, is
Robin Williams drama is very good, and this one is good because like it was like probably one of the first ones where he was like, everyone's like, Robin Williams drama, right. And this one, the flash drive is kind of like a worse, but also better version of 1 Hour Photo. So you're probably, if you've seen that, you're probably like, what do you mean worse? Bad already happens in 1 Hour Photo. I'm like, okay. I won't say it to you, Ben, because you definitely
don't want to spoil it for me.
I don't want to spoil it. It's very good. But yeah, as this happens, as the character does this photoshopping out, the character notices that the people in the family photos after each subsequent erasure start to look a little bit more translucent, right? They get all ghostly pale and see-through.
Yeah.
This makes it a little bit easier for the character to remove them from the photo because like you don't have to worry so much about filling it in because there's some background photo data information in it. It's basically like the systematic destruction of a family by way of something you learned in your journalism class. Very nice, very good. So now that prank's complete and everyone in the photos are gone, he's like, or they're like, yeah, sleep time, gotta go. I'll return it to them. They're like, what happened to my photos? And be like, what are you talking about? But almost did a Cartman impression.
That was Cartman. Yeah,
I was like, oh, shit, Cartman. Anyway, so the next day, the character wakes up to their mom reading the newspaper, making you wonder a little bit more when this was set, enough that newspapers were common in the morning, and that someone could have access to Photoshop at home.
And the flash drives,
flash drives are common. So for me, I think for us, maybe not that long ago, because I had Photoshop in like high school, which is like 10.
Yeah, it's like
years ago, right?
Or I'd say 2000s probably were in
there, that kind of thing, right? And my friend had Photoshop in middle school, which is even longer than that. Anyway, they wake up, mom's reading the newspaper, and they look over the newspaper and they're like, family of 5 disappeared. Police have no leads. Our friend scrambles for the paper and sees this. The neighbor of this family saw they were nowhere to be found. He called the police to find the house disturbingly vacant. No furniture. No TV. Nothing. All they found were random pictures of backgrounds hanging from the walls. Police say it was as if they never existed.
Okay.
They've done it now. Yeah. They erased a family out of existence by way of Photoshop.
Hope you're happy.
Hope you're happy. Right? And the story ends with the following, as all stories should. So here's the lesson. Don't alter photos that aren't yours. You may find that it comes with severe consequences.
Okay.
Damn. Right? Yeah. It's a successful little fairy tale, right? You get an opening that's like tale as old as time, like once upon a time, right? Warning of you of something. And then they show you how they did it, and they end with the consequences of their actions. It's kind of like a fable. It's kind of like a moral of the story kind of thing, right? Successfully told. This was. And from what I've seen from Skeleton Dude 199's Reddit comment history, a wonderful sentence. They seem like a pretty active writer. They comment on like writing threads. They engage with folks about like writing practices, talk about previous work. So like we can be like, oh, this is very stereotypical story format, but like obviously like later on they'll grow. So this definitely seems like this is someone who is pretty into writing and developing it as a craft. I like this short story. Is very quick to the point. Yes, cliches happen, right? You're like, fair warning, you learn your lesson. But like cliches happen and cliches repeat for a very good reason, because they work, right? Tropes exist because they work, right? It's familiar to you. So if you are a parent or a guardian that was FBI or CIA, I'd imagine that this is the type of shit that you'd tell your kids about at night, right? Don't pick up random USBs, right? And if your parent or guardian is a member of the FBI and CIA, what are you doing on our show? Tattling? What are you going to do? Yeah. Send a vampire to my neighborhood? Joke's on you. They already did that. I don't go outside anyway. But yeah. Sure. Right. Okay. Now, I know what you're saying. Wouldn't you do that too, JD? Wrong, you silly little bitch. Let me and your FBI parent stop you right there for a second, because what are you thinking? Wait, Twilight reference, even though I've never seen it. Bella, where the hell you been, Loca? Yeah. What the hell are you doing, Loca? But so sometime between 2016 and 2019, the idea of juice jacking really got to people. Ben, do you know what juice jacking is?
Oh, is that like the general fear around like plugging in strange USBs? Is it like the like charging station type shit where it's like, don't ever do this, you'll get... Yeah. Ben's
familiar with juice jacking, which is good. But
many times jack? No, never mind.
Yes. Juice jacking? Not that kind of juice jacking, you weirdo. Put that down. Put that down. You're busy right now. You're listening to us, right? Okay. So the FBI warned people about it. The FCC told you to think about it. Beware of getting your juice jacked. Perverts, calm down. Let me explain to you what the hell juice jacking is. The FCC described it as the act of, or the idea that the public USB charging stations are or can be used by terrible people to hack, steal, or jack your information. They get all up in that USB port and put malware in it that's meant to fuck your shit up. Steal your selfies, your saved passwords, your playlists, whatever you have on there. 3D. Right? The FBI basically is like, we recommend that you bring your own charger, the USB and the outlet plug part. Don't just rely on your US cable and think that makes you safe. You got to bring the plug. Get familiar with your plug like you're a 15-year-old finding out for the first time about that good sour diesel, and you've got an inkling to text your local fellow teen that has an older sibling, right?
Yeah, live in California.
Yeah.
the West Coast. Yeah.
Sorry. Sour diesel. I have a link in the script for you. I'm not selling. I'm just telling you what it is. It says 13 best Cali strains, top strains from California.
Yeah.
3D. Okay, right.
Yeah.
So you may be going, JD, what the fuck? Which honestly is a very common thing here on the show. But I promise you, in 2011, juice jacking became a thing or a concept. It was coined in that time, so it's been 12 years. Homies over at Authentic 8 set up a little experiment at the RSA security conference in SF and proceeded to scare the shit out of a couple people. Now, you're probably going, what happened, JD? You, at home, hit up that Cyberpunk by ATs, not the video, not the time for you to get distracted, you loser. And let me tell you about the experiment. Authenticate set up a kiosk type thing. So kiosk, right? Like those people who sell you sunglasses in the middle of the mall. Yeah. They set up that kiosk. It looked perfectly normal. It had a bunch of wires on it that were compatible with a bunch of things that you can charge. Had a little attractive free sign on it, the works, and a pretty little coat on a wolf. Now, it being a security conference, you'd think that people wouldn't be so willy-nilly about it. They wouldn't just plug in their shit. They're like, we're safe, right? Ugh. Wrong. Apparently 360 security nerds used that thing in 3.5 days. Upon using the kiosk, a big old block of text showed up on like the kiosk screen that said, you should not trust public kiosks with your smartphone. Information can be retrieved or downloaded without your consent. Luckily for you, this station has taken the ethical route and your data is safe. Enjoy the free charge. Wow.
What a shame for
yeah. Like shit. What if I was at 1% and I needed to get a taxi?
You're like, yes, I know. Yeah.
Right. It's 2011. You need your phone for things. Yeah. Some things, right? Juice jacking was a thing of nightmares for some people, constantly on the go and needing to keep their battery up, right? Now that they can't charge in public, what's next? You can't piss? God damn it. Right. But with the FBI and the FCC and various agencies and municipalities over the US warning you about getting your juice jacked for its life, milked all to hell, you might think, God damn, I've charged in public a couple of times. Have I been milked? No, probably not. Okay. Throughout the years since the term juice jacking was introduced, there haven't really been mass instances of people getting jacked through their USB, like a fucked up reach around, like someone's jacking you through their USB. But yeah, in 2023, Slate and Vox conducted some checking around and found out that this whole thing might not even necessarily be a thing.
Okay.
Right? Slate checked in with Vicky Migoya, who is a Denver FBI spokesperson, who told them that this was just like a basic little PSA that was bumped up from the original FCC warning about getting your juice jacked, right?
Yeah.
It's a doable concept. The idea that someone could mess with a USB port or some connection, USB connection. Zulfikar Ramzan of Aura Labs, who is currently a chief scientist and CEO of Aura Labs, told Slate that it was an idea, but not something that's like pervasive the way that they're like, don't do it, right? Yeah. No one's really getting milked out there, but Ramzan says that it's really only considered to be a desirable attack method for hackers, he said. If they are targeting a particular individual, like a high-level executive, government official, a political dissident, or an investigative journalist, right? Someone who has something that you're like willing to take the risk for, right? So normal person, me and Ben, our juice is saved, right? Hopefully. High profile people, watch your cup. Hide your Michael's secret sauce before your juice gets jacked, right? It's basically kind of like a thing that we talk a lot about on the show. Like a scary little thing becomes a big issue because organizations, municipalities, groups, or whatever will honestly post anything as vague as a PSA and just spread it. Like without like fact checking it. That same Denver FBI spokesperson basically told Slate that the FBI tweet about juice jacking was just a rehash version of a previous PSA that the FCC gave out, and that they don't have specific instances where it has happened recently and in a size large enough that people did need to worry that much about it.
Yeah. So it's like this could potentially happen, but it hasn't really. Okay.
Yeah. So just watch out for it, right? Unchecked juice jacking became a thing that people were spreading as fact, right? Not a victim in sight in the numbers that this whole thing could be proposing. Like if the FBI was warning about it, right? If the FBI is warning about it, you're like, it's got to be a thing. And you're like, okay, whatever, right? So
Who wouldn't trust the FBI?
Not that they've ever.
Nothing shady there.
Kidding. I literally was like, anyway, who knows? You can probably link it to the very real idea of like card skimmers, which is very real, right? This is something that Vox suggests. Like card skimmers are like their own peak at this kind of mess, right? So both Slate and Vox come to the same conclusion. Mass hysteria seems pretty easy to do if you're the FBI or the FCC, right? That kind of thing. You've seen it here. It can be done not just by the FBI, but just like regular old people, like with Momo the bird, the clown phenomenon, and other sort of mass things that are going on, appearances that are not really necessarily happening. And I'm sure this won't be the last time you hear about it on the show, right? Who knows? Ben could talk about it in the next 20 minutes, right? Right. But on a more genuine-ish note, let's go back to that whole picking up the USB from the ground thing. Because you're sitting there like, I would never do that. It's real. It's actually real and pretty plausible. Something that people have done and have been observed to do, right? In a study conducted at and by some folks from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Who knows?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm an immigrant. We can see that people will truly just pick up a USB from the ground and plug it into their setup. So Ben, don't do
done
this.
That before, yeah. For sure.
Oh my!
What have you not? You don't just find strangers?
No.
That's why you have like okay. Yeah.
Ben.
What?
Oh my God. Anyway, PSA: don't fucking do that. Okay. Anyway, so this team of researchers dropped 297 to 300 USB drives across the University of Illinois campus and had a pretty hilarious success rate of people picking up the USB and plugging it into their computers and laptops.
Yeah.
They found that people picked up and plugged in. Okay, Ben, I haven't been doing research stats in a very long time. And when I do, it's silly, goofy stuff.
Well, I don't know why you look at me. I mean, I'm not.
Is the EP in the room right now?
EP is in the house, yeah.
But it was their success rate is 45 to 98%.
Okay, it's a big range.
That's a big range, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
How does that work?
I made sure that it wasn't like 45 and then dash for some reason 98, 45, 98% times or something like that, but it says 45 to 98%. So okay. we'll think about that later, right? So they found that people picked it up in that sort of percentage, and let's take a look at this experiment and see what happened, right? So how was this done? They dropped around 300 USB drives across the campus in various locations and times of day. The team had a tag on the HTML files that allowed them to track when any of the files were opened. They conducted a survey on the people that picked up and plugged in the USB, not just picked up and returned it, right? So with this, the team found the following. The main reasons why people did this were out of curiosity and wanting to help someone. Some people did just want to keep the USB for themselves, which is perfectly fine. Free real estate, right? Some people took precaution, whether this be by running a virus scan on the USB, using a computer that's offline, or sacrificing a non-personal computer, so plugging in at a school computer or a computer that's not theirs, right? Ben, when you did this, what did you do? Was it just your computer?
Probably just my computer. I was in high school, it's fine.
Got your FBI, FCC, I got your first case of juice Jackie right here. Right? Okay, so people had to look around on the files out of curiosity, but also trying to see if they can use this to find the person to return the USB to them, right? And after being told about the experiment, people weren't angry, but they were receptive to answering the survey and the questions and about like taking more precaution in the future, right? Because they're like, yo, what the fuck? And also, lastly, people will just pick stuff up from the ground, right? In the script, there's a bunch of photos of how the USBs looked, but it's basically like a normal USB. I hope you know what a USB thumb drive looks like, right? Some of them had labels on them with an address. Some of them had the word confidential on it. Some of them with a key and another address, and then some keys, and then unlabeled drive. So it's like a various kind of thing, right? Yeah. So people will pick stuff up from the ground I get it. Yeah. I do that. But USBs, don't do it, right? So be aware of juice jacking and that it could be happening, but it isn't also happening, that kind of thing, right? But also don't pick up USBs from the ground and plug them into the computer, please. Just leave it there or like move it to the side or like put it back in the lost and found, right? Some people did bring it to the lost and found. What bet?
But I'd seen a documentary and there was this guy and he had his like Bitcoin wallet. He was one of the first Bitcoin guys and he had it on a USB, right? The encryption code. So he lost the USB. Now that USB is worth like, millions of dollars. If you find, potentially, it's like the lottery. You might get a virus, but if you find that USB, you're like an instant millionaire.
The stats of this, Ben.
Well, but again, like I said, I'm not a numbers guy, but
you have a 45 to 95% chance that we don't. Oh God. Okay, so here's the thing. You can either listen to me or you can listen to Ben. Right?
Yeah, the USB lottery.
Oh God. I mean, it could be the same chances as playing the lottery, right? But at least in the lottery, you can get like $300. Like, what are you gonna get? Like LimeWire on your like computer that's just like full of like, I did not have sexual intercourse with this woman, right? So now that you know all of that, right? Let's pretend that doesn't apply to you and your USB, right? You find a perfectly fine little USB and you just go ahead and stick it into the USB hub and bloop, Ben, a folder of photos. And for a second, let's pretend you're a little edgy, right? For a second, you want to mess around before you return this thing to somebody. You pull up GIMP, Photoshop, whatever, and you get cracking on erasing little things here and there, just pushing a couch, an inch every day and making your housemates feel like they've gone a little cuckoo, right? Manipulation, fun. Right. Recently, I read a series of tweets from Maya Cade, who is the creator of the Black Film Archive. She quoted a tweet from the Google Photos Twitter account that was basically a demo of how the magic eraser works on the phone. Do you know? Have you seen the magic eraser commercials?
Oh, like Google? Pixel? Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah. Yeah. So Maya tweeted, lately, I've been thinking about the ways mass digital storage has become a tethered extension of our memory functioning when our camera rolls have the omnipresent ability to process, store, and alter how we see the world. Our cognition is permanently shifted. The smartphone's presence means that we rely on the device to capture our memories, often with an audience in mind, beautifully then to present to said audience, and use the device to be the site of memory, likely without reflection until a notification pops up to remind us. The important stuff. The work of remembering then is left to an algorithmic device that demands all of our attention. The mere presence of a smart device promises a life of ease, to be a balm to our boredom and curiosities, but at what cost? So, what makes you think, right? And that got me thinking way back when I first saw it, as a person who grew up before Instagram, but also during the Instagram age, right? I remember when Instagram first popped up, I didn't have a phone because I was a weird lore drop. I was weird about phones when I was younger.
Yeah.
Like I had a phone and then somehow from like 6th to 8th grade to like 9th grade, I was like, no phones allowed. I didn't have a phone at all.
Okay. So like that was that still like the era of like the keyboard phone?
Yeah. Prior to that I had like the chunky like thing from Singular. So Singular. And it was it was cool. It like lit up on the side. You could like program it to light up kind of thing. But we were still on like, what is it called? The T9 keyboard or something like that. Right. So after that I was like, phones are bad.
Yeah.
The same way I am about microwaves still for some reason. But yeah, we are people who grew up during that time, and the Instagram, I see how it has maybe shaped and shifted our concept of photos, especially like the idea of like pics or it didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And before we get deeper into this, let's talk about Magic Eraser on the Google 6 Plus. For those who have never seen it, this is not SpawnCon. I have a terrible iPhone. Tom's guide tells us that this is a tool that can easily help you get rid of unwanted photo bombers, rocks, animals, trees, light poles from your photos, whatever, right? I encourage you to check out the article I linked in the script, as well as as well as finding videos of how it's used, because it's actually pretty cool, pretty interesting, right? If you're like drawn to that kind of thing. The draw of it, Magic Eraser, is that it's easy, right? You don't have to know Photoshop to get rid of that smiling girl. You just circle it and wipe it away, right? Magic Eraser is able to do this due to machine learning, AI, and all that jazz, right? We've spoken about this in our little discussion on AI Lobe, right? At this point, I have also tried out generative fill on Photoshop twice, and it was to fill out the background of a photo that I had, because the background I had wasn't enough. It was very cool in that sense, because it was just me using it to like fill in something. Right. Then you sent me stickers on Instagram, quite possibly some of terrible things I've seen regarding AI stickers, right? And with all that sort of being said, with thinking about like my kid, we're going to get into like me dumping a bunch of questions and observations on you regarding memories and what you're going to think about. And we're going to maybe discuss it for a bit after and all that, right? We will now think about our memories. Remember your memories. Rememberies. Think about how you cherish them, and let's toss them into a salad spinner and do some soul searching, right? Okay. Ready? Okay. Is an altered memory still a memory, right? Is it true to the memory of an event, or is it an altered memory? Can you even call it a memory, kind of thing, right? What is the fact of that moment and event? Is an altered memory still a fact? Or does this memory then become like an opinion, right? To sort of like do a little duality kind of thing of it. And when you do these things, like, why does it matter so much that you need to take out this random object or person or light, right? Think about like what's behind me right now. I could take off this like little dustpan thing, this calendar, the Slim Jim that's on top of my tower, your work, right? Snack. Like, yeah, my little snack. But like, why does it matter that I need to take it out that much? Like, what is it? What is its presence to the photo that I need to erase it so much, right?
Right.
With all the questions on that part that I've asked, what is your opinion, Ben, or thoughts? You don't have to have an opinion. I'm not putting you on the spot right here, but it's like the idea of like editing photos when you put it online to like thing, like what are your thoughts?
Well, it kind of made the story, and that this made me think of like that like guy that got kind of popular on social media because people would like request that he do Photoshop jobs, right? And then he kind of had like a monkey's paw wish thing of like, oh, I want to, can you please get rid of that person in the back? And then he'd like get rid of them or something like that. So, I mean, that was kind of like, that was like a funny bit that he was doing, more or less. But the desire to like edit images is like interesting. I mean, obviously we live in the world of like filters, and like people always kind of want to alter images a little bit. They're never quite as real as we like to think, like a photo is, because it's not like, I think that's the thing, is like a photo is never like objective, right? Like we kind of conceive of them as like, oh, this is like an objective thing, but it's not. There's always like the person that's taking it has like a certain bias that they're embodying. So I mean, it makes sense that you would want to like edit that photo as well and kind of make it present the way you want to present your life or whatever it is.
Yeah, that makes me think of like how you take photos of yourself versus how you
Other
look
people.
Right. You like, sometimes if I see, like, I am not going to be like, I've never deleted the background of a photo. Like, sometimes I will purposely take a picture with like a blank wall so that that kind of thing, like, because even if that's not like physical Photoshop editing, like I'm editing my space physically, right?
Yeah,
right. Like that kind of thing. It's like, it's the choice of how either I want to be seen in that moment, or that kind of thing. Like even like a picture right now, I'd still point it at this specific thing because that's what I want you to see, right?
Right.
That kind of thing. But yeah, unbiased photos is also like a thing to think about. It was like, definitely, it's like what you want to be seen. Like when you put things out there, like what do you want to be seen, even if it's like not a conscious action that you take, right?
Right.
That kind of thing. In terms of like when we're previously on like Zoom calls at work, kind of thing. Like how do you make the background look? Like why are you making it look that way? That kind of thing. Why do you like to do this? So this like it's not just limited to photos, kind of thing, right? In this instant, right? But yeah. then let's now look at this in terms of the story, right? You are like, let's blow out away from like the concept of you're erasing these stories, but like in terms of the fact of memory, right? What would you do if you had access to your childhood photos and they were the only evidence that you ever had of your childhood, but then you found out that someone was like completely erased from your photos, right? What do you ask of your family? Is this a memory still of your time? Or is it like something else, right? Is it like this sentence? I was like, what the fuck? Is it evidence then instead of like a memory? Like it's something more sinister and darker than you wanted it to be? Is it sadder now and a little bit more confusing? Like you're like, oh, this person's gone. Like what's the reason? But also like what else in your life was edited and altered? Right? That kind of thing. So like put yourself in that headspace. Like what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, like we talked a little bit about memory in some past episodes and the way that is faulty. But yeah, images are limited as well. And especially with like better editing software and the ability to change more, it is like, where is the foundation? I mean, there's kind of like, there's that saying that like the past is a locked room, right? Like you can never go back there. You never know because, you know, something happened, but you can only ever get impressions of it from, you know, secondary sources, right? You can see like in that metaphor, like through the cracks in the door, you can kind of see into it from like, oh, look, these are the photos we had from like the camping trip or whatever. But you're not like going back to the camping trip. You're just seeing like a representation of it. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting conversation to have, especially with like the ability to change it and make it be like, well, this is what the past, an idealized form of the past almost. Yeah.
And then now we are beyond editing and changing photos. We are now able to, at least in the beginnings of creating things out of nowhere, right? If you are in the circles that I am in, you may have seen like the Steve Harvey in the forest running away from creatures kind of things, right? Nicki Minaj with like various like historical figures, Wendy Williams with various historical like figures. Like those are like the comic side of it, right? It's like a little funny to see Steve Harvey in the forest, like running away from the Bigfoot that he asked his opinion about, like what are the top things that you would say to your grandma kind of thing. But then like, I remember when the like people were online saying like Trump arrested kind of thing. There were like various like AI mugshots kind of things that you had to like sort of navigate as like, which one of this is real? Because this is believable enough that it's like, you know, like you want it and it's believable enough, right? So
yeah,
we are now beyond like editing photos, erasing things, and now we are in the creation of them, which is
even more biased. And,
yeah. So you have some thinking to do at home. If you want to email us, icecreamyumipodcast@gmail.com. We'll say it at the end. Don't worry. Right. And then this one's called "What If It Was That Deep?" Aside from the alteration of memory that I decided to lean into here, we could also read very deeply into this, right? Like I recommend reading this and then thinking about it in this term, right? For some reason, when I was writing this, like in terms of like colonization, right? I'll do it quick and dirty using something familiar to all of us. Colonization, in terms of myself, I am Filipino. I am familiar with the history of the U.S. occupation, which I think is still happening, and the colonization of the Philippines from 1888 to 1946 after being scooped from Spain. My grandparents, I thought 1946 was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Until I realized some things that my grandparents on my dad's side were alive during that time.
Right. Yeah.
And in the Philippines growing up during that time. And my dad was floor drop 4 years away from being born. And I was like, damn, like if it just lasted, my dad would have been born like around during that time. Right. And then my great grandparents were still in the process of hiding and running away from the military and changing our names. So I don't know our true family's last name, so I can't go into ancestry.com. Congratulations. All right. If you're in the US, you've got the continued systematic destruction of just about everyone who isn't. And then if you're elsewhere,
Yeah.
The US definitely did something to you.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
And if they didn't, then England did. So
yeah. The US, England,
France.
Yeah. France.
Yeah,
right?
You know what we're talking about. Yeah.
Someone's had a thumb in your pie of a country, right? And called it a macaroni. And if you read the flash drive with the concept of colonization, you can connect it pretty much point for point, except for like the regrets expressed by the character in the flash drive going like, you shouldn't do this. Some people still don't recognize what they've done, right? So it's like the idea of like X stumbles across something. So in flash drive, that is the person finding the flash drive. In colonization, X discovers something and goes to a land or location, finding it despite people existing there. X takes the thing due to just to curiosity and interest. Person takes the flash drive. Person establishes control over something with some intent, right? X kind of sits on the flash drive and gives it a think, sleeps in the idea of it, and then like active colonization, making decisions and things that govern a location and land and moves based on these like decisions, right? And then X systematically manipulates something in order to erase something. So our character basically photoshops the family out of the photos. He's like, hee hee ha ha, this is funny. And then colonization wise, systematic erasure of people and the culture of like a location. You get it, point for point kind of thing. But maybe this isn't what Skeleton Dude 199 intended. Maybe Skeleton Dude was just like, and it's a funny story, right? That kind of thing, right? Maybe it's just a warning about a USB drive and why you should definitely not pick up that thing and plug it into your computer. Maybe Skeleton Dude 199 came across these FBI and FCC articles and decided, here's how I could make that scary, right? But maybe it's just like all of the other urban legends that exist to us. The clown statue that isn't a clown statue. The baby in the microwave. Particularly favorite of mine is the car following you around as you go home, shining a light, like flashing their headlights on your car, with you thinking that they're after you and they're following you, only for you to find out it's because they're shining a light on the man inside of your car with you every time he like pops up, and so many others. Maybe it's just a little story, but maybe it's also like an urban legend that has like something to it. Maybe. Whatever. But that is JD and a flash drive. Let's go.
Ooh, let's go. That was excellent. I liked your colonization read. I thought that was fun. Even if that wasn't what Skeleton Dude intended, I think that is a good illustration of kind of the effects and the process of it, of like the trivialization of people into like, oh, it's just like the erasure of people's past, and how that doesn't really impact the people that do the erasing, that they feel no stain on their conscience for it.
Yeah. And it was just the way the character kind of goes about it is like hee hee ha ha funny, right? Like now I'm erasing this like thing. And it's just like kind of like a little funny joke kind of thing, but like in terms of colonization, you are like actively doing something, and like maybe you're not thinking too deep about it other than like I need this and these people are in the way kind of thing. And I forgot to pick this up. This is a USB drive. Okay. Yeah. People at home.
For the younger listeners,
like
what a USB drive looks like.
How I think this is 2 of God's gigabytes. Wow. 2 of God's gigabytes.
USB drive.
Right. So it's old. It's my brother's. I have a hard drive that's like this big.
You have a floppy disk there as well?
I don't have a floppy disk. I wish I had one. I know there's one somewhere that I like randomly opened. But yeah, this was very interesting in terms of like how it was told as a very like, it's like 2 pages when I put it on Google Docs, and quick to the point. I really felt that this person was, Hachi and Minnie are hitting each other. I really felt that this person was someone who at least looked at stories and kind of like was like, this is how it is told and how stories are written, because it did feel like that, which is interesting to notice and then kind of examine, because like it literally is like first sentence, this is what happened to me, and I'll tell you the story of it, and last sentence is, and this is a warning for you to not do it, and then like the entire
so it's a good little well-structured little story.
So if you're someone who's studying story writing, like at its very beginnings, this is something I would recommend you read. But then I would also recommend you read it just in general with like the thought of like memory and alteration, and then maybe just a little bit of that colonization, so you can have a little thought practice because you're bored on a Saturday before Halloween.
Yeah, you got a nice quick read. But also, you kind of found like the USB drive Death Note. So think of the power you could have if you went real ham with that USB drive.
I was going to say this is like a modernized version of Death Note, but maybe like for our youth, right?
Yeah, right.
The USB. What would it, okay, so like what would be the Death Note notebook now?
For today? Oh, fuck. Yeah. What would drop down? I don't know. Would it just be like the Notes app?
Could it be a Notes app or like...
It could be something else.
Like the what is it? The phone book in your phone, right? You delete like a person like from there. List? Yeah, the contact list, and you're just like goodbye. You know,
or do you think it would be like a TikTok thing where you like have to do like a TikTok dance, and then like it's like get ready with me, and then gonna do the Death Note, and then you point at the name, and then the motherfucker's dead. Yeah.
Oh, this reminds me. One of the trailers during Five Nights at Freddy's was like Thanksgiving?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and one part of it is like to warn everyone that you're gonna like be like a target is like they got tagged on an Instagram photo. So maybe it's like an Instagram photo, it's an Instagram account, and then like if your name is posted, right, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm like so out of touch with like what the youths are doing right now that I'm like not even sure. Honestly,
I've even recently heard that like youths are not on Instagram.
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've heard
what
that.
Are they? I might like. What are they on? Because Ben, you and I are on there every day.
Is it TikTok? Is TikTok the main youth one? I feel like in my head it is, but I feel like even that maybe things are changing so fast now that it's like maybe that's not even the place to be now.
When like a white millennial is on TikTok, right? That's probably like on that kind of thing.
Oh, probably youth-wise, what it would be is like Skibidi Toilet, but like you put somebody's head on there.
Ben, what? I don't even know what that is.
It's like a Gary's Mod thing where it's like I guess it's like real big for like teens now, where it's like the Gary's Mod, like G-Man, but his head is like in a toilet, and then there's like weird music. It's very strange, bizarre, abstract shit. But I guess that's what the kids are on that shit right now. So like maybe that would be the Death Note is like you do like a Skibidi Toilet, but with somebody's head in it that you want dead.
Oh my god, those are some words I have never heard before. Because I still am like, maybe the kids are on Roblox and they're creating a character on Roblox, and like if they delete you, you're dead from the world.
That could
if you die in Roblox, you die in real life.
Yeah. Or it's like that. Maybe it's like, it's like a incantation. It's like the song. Like you could probably trace to the exact week that we record this if I say it, but it's like that, throwing out the gat for the Rizzler, right? You're so skibbity. You're so Phantom Tax. I just want to be your Sigma, right? But you like put the person's name.
I heard that the other day.
Yeah, you put the person's name into it, and then they die because you've summoned them. You've put them in the magic words.
Oh my god. What is a gat?
So I think a gat is an ass, right?
Okay. Because I thought it was like...
So it's kind of expanding now to just be like generally like, oh, gat, but it's like originally, because it's like from, like gat damn, like, look at that ass. But that's the original, but now it's kind of like as more kids and white kids are getting into it, it's just expanded into like just like gat, like you're hot, gat, like that kind of shit. So it's not as specifically as like a goddamn ass anymore. The evolution of it.
Took a little linguistics term, try to hit up our linguistics professor. Would be like, do you know it? Gat, but that's crazy. Yeah.
The etymology of gat. Look at my course. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the flash drive and the term gat.
Yeah, gat. So, in this segment, I'm going to be doing something a little different. Usually, we do one instance of something, a single story, a character from a creepypasta, that kind of stuff. But for this episode, I'm going to be examining a genre. An oeuvre.
Or you a little French right there for a second.
I don't know how to say that word. I wrote it down. I was like, I know that's a word. A vibe. I'm going to be talking about the internet's own nostalgia-dipped horror genre, analog horror. Analog horror has increasingly come to define the look of online horror, supplanting the written creepypasta and giving way to a more audiovisual experience. It has increasingly broken the bonds of the internet with films such as Skidamarink, We're All Going to the World's Fair, The Backrooms, and potentially, if you squint, Five Nights at Freddy's, cashing in on the style of analog horror. In 2022, there were 9 analog horror projects on YouTube with over 100,000 subscribers. The genre largely exists in the space of unfiction, that is, fiction which purports not to be fiction. This can include creepypastas, videos, alternate reality games. Using our own creamery-based podcast metaphor, it is the cream that we turn into butter.
Damn!
Stylistically, analog horror can be thought of as an offshoot of the found footage genre that uses or replicates the look and sound of analog technology, be it VHS, tape cassettes, AM, or television transmissions. Unlike what we often think of as found footage when it comes to films such as the Blair Witch Project, Cloverfield, or the film that summarizes JD and my relationship, Creep, analog horror does not necessarily aim to replicate a first-person perspective. A piece of analog horror may appear to be anything from a news broadcast to a government-produced PSA, a company training video, or an advertisement. This isn't meant to exclude simple kind of camcorder videos from analog horror, but the most important aspect of analog horror is that it replicates something you would have seen or heard in the analog era.
Would then there are people in this house be analog horror?
I think that could factor. Yeah, that could fit in there as like kind of using the styles of the genre.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of the history of analog horror, where did it come from and how did it develop into a now ubiquitous form of internet storytelling, I want to give a major shout out to the filmmaker and documentarian Alex Hara, who made a 3-hour-long YouTube documentary on the history of analog horror. Major source for this segment as a whole, but especially when it comes to breaking down the history. So Hara breaks down the roots of analog horror all the way back in the 1930s with fictional radio broadcasts that did not let listeners know that they were fiction. Most famously in the US, we had Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. Mm-hmm. Other proto-examples include David Cronenberg's Videodrome, where a corporation aims to use secret frequencies hidden in television broadcasts for social control. The found footage movement in horror is also a major contributor to the look and feel of what would come to be known as analog horror. Notably, the 1992 British TV special Ghostwatch, which was made to appear like a normal TV special, including live call-ins, quote unquote, and following a group of paranormal researchers investigating a haunting that quickly goes wrong. People didn't know that it was fake, right? And then also the Blair Witch Project, which built the hype up by claiming to be real. They went so far as to produce a fake documentary on the Sci-Fi Channel and set up a website where people could learn more about the lore of the witch. On the real side of things, a couple of actual television hijackings have been influential, such as the Captain Midnight broadcast signal intrusion, where someone interrupted HBO with the message, quote, "Good evening, HBO, from Captain Midnight. $12.95 a month? No way. Showtime, movie channel, beware." Which is a message that I think we can all get behind.
Right now.
As true as it ever was.
Still true.
Or the still mysterious Max Headroom signal hijacking in Chicago.
Yeah.
Where on November 22nd, 1987, 2 stations had their signals hijacked, sending a bizarre pirate broadcast of a still unknown individual in a Max Headroom costume, ranting about nerds, and then getting his bare ass spanked.
Yeah.
Flash forward to the early 2000s, and we begin to see the actual roots of analog horror in the growing ARG field, right? Alternate reality games. We've kind of talked about that before, but we're talking like Ben Drown's Slender Man episode. But as a refresher, these are multimedia storytelling projects that require users to search for and use different sources to learn more about the narrative being built by the storyteller. Hara cites the Wyoming incident from 2006, which was an ARG about a strange broadcast hijacking where harmful frequencies were played to unknowing viewers. Mm-hmm. And he kind of says this was like the first series to use the aesthetics and setting that would become the norm in analog horror. Mm-hmm. And then flash forward to 2013, which was a big year for analog horror with the release of the WNUF Halloween special, which was a comedy horror told in the style of a 1980s news broadcast. And it was another investigation of a haunted house, complete with fake advertisements. Mm-hmm. 2013 was also the start of Kraina Gryzbo TV. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's Polish, and it's Polish for Mushroom Land TV, which was a viral art project by Victor Stribog. Krane Grzbo TV is a truly surreal offering. The web series was made to look like a 1980s Eastern European children's television program and is a mashup of live action, collage, animation, and stop motion. It was probably my favorite thing that I watched for this, so I would recommend that.
Okay.
It also features a lot of disorienting jumps and cuts and a pretty dope soundtrack that is heavily inspired by Vaporwave. The series was explicitly hauntological. We discussed hauntology in our episode on The Caretaker, but to bring that back up, hauntology refers to the persistence of cultural forms of the past into the present. Hera interviewed Victor Stribog for the documentary, and when asked why analog horror became so persistent as a subgenre, he said, quote, "Maybe it was all of us simultaneously realizing that horror and mystery in the digital age is increasingly harder and harder to create. And in order to find that spark again, we need to occlude it with flawed technology of the past." 2015 was the next big year for analog horror, which still had not been formalized into the genre yet. But that year, the creators of Marble Hornets, the first and probably most influential Slenderman ARG, created a new web series called Clear Lake 44. Marble Hornets as a found footage ARG certainly had an impact on the development of what would come to be analog horror. But Marble Hornets did not place an emphasis on old technology as a storytelling element, so it's often kind of excluded from that history a little bit. And this would come to be the defining characteristic of analog horror, right? Clear Lake 44 was styled to appear like broadcasts from a small TV station and was largely a spin-off of the story of Marble Hornets, but it did feature broadcast elements, and that would soon become kind of central to this first era of analog horror. Also in 2015, Local 58 started, which is often considered to be the first official analog horror.
Oh, okay.
Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were the ones who actually coined the term, with the slogan in 2017, analog horror at 476 megahertz. Local 58 was also styled to look like broadcasts from a local TV station, but they were explicitly old broadcasts made to appear as if they came from the 1980s or 1990s and were subsequently uploaded to YouTube, with the exception of one video which centered on a rogue GPS. It was more of an anthology series than a single narrative, and this would come to be the standard for analog horror series, though there was an overall through line that the moon is a malevolent eldritch horror. Shorts were styled to appear like emergency alerts, news broadcasts, and station hijackings, all altered to appear like the footage was shot before the turn of the century and with added static and noise to the audio. They were also the first to nail a structure that would come to define analog horror shorts. A seemingly normal television broadcast is interrupted by a cryptic message directed towards the viewer, or a hijacking to some found footage segment, and then at the end of the video, normalcy is restored. So, shortly after Local 58, Channel 7 began, which has been accused of cloning the format of Local 58, with a fairly good reason, but it did gain popularity and showed that Local 58's format could be reproduced and work to gain attention. After this demonstration, with the nature of the internet, many other channels started to use Local 58 style and format of normal, weird, normals videos. In 2016, CH/SS started and blended together the aesthetics of retro footage with the ARG element. CHSS, as it existed on YouTube, was made to appear as a series of videos produced in the 1980s, documenting secretive government projects and espionage with an overarching supernatural mystery. The rest of the ARG took place in sources online and made it feel like users were uncovering a plot that had been hidden since the 1980s. In 2016, the team behind Marble Hornets and Clear Lake 44 created a new series called ECFA, which updated their TV station format that they touched on in Clear Lake 44 with the aesthetics of old media and told the story of kind of like a TV station that was run by someone who was gradually kind of going insane. 2017 to 2019 was the peak of this first era of analog horror, which could probably best be classified as the broadcast era. Alex Hera, the documentarian, suggests that in 2019, the emphasis of analog horror began to shift and became less about programs that you might have seen on television and more about analog mediums themselves. In particular, the VHS tape became an object of horror. This is, of course, kind of after the VHS film series started in 2012. With the VHS tape becoming the object of focus, the scope of what kind of video formats could be included in the genre grew, right? You know, became more instructional videos, company training materials, commercials, PSAs, even family or home videos, right? It wasn't just about recreating the feelings of waking up to whatever channel you left on at 3 a.m. It became more about finding tapes and not being sure what there was on them. This coincided with less of an emphasis on ARG elements. Part of this shift has to do with an overall move away from the tenets of ARGs, that everything is real and everything is part of the game. Creators like Chris Straub, who was behind Local 58, began to include credits with their names on the videos that they produced. Chris Straub told Hera that he initially faced a backlash when he started including credits. Some people felt that it was breaking immersion and made the video seem less believable. But in Straub's words, quote, "Yes, it's a fiction, and it's allowed to be a fiction." Straub said that the decision to include credits was driven by his work on earlier projects like Candle Cove, which were frequently reposted without permission or credit. Straub was one of the first to include his name in his analog horror videos, and with Local 58 being such a foundational entry in analog horror, a lot of other creators followed suit. Hera noted that the last few years of analog horror have moved away in general from the anonymous creator. Many channels used to be dedicated to their ARG or their horror story with no indication of who is behind it, but this has changed over time, and now it's not uncommon for the creator to include their name in the channel. The second wave of analog horror creators did feature some familiar faces. Aiden Chick created Local 58 clone Channel 7 as a teen, but began a new series called Analog Archives. This series did include elements of broadcast horror, but also brought in some segments styled as security camera footage and some classic found footage bits as well. We also need to get back to Five Nights at Freddy's for a minute. So the first Five Nights at Freddy's game dropped in 2014, and the game, as we discussed, you play a security guard in a kind of Chuck E. Cheese style restaurant in the 1980s. The gameplay is mostly monitoring security cameras and finding weird tapes. So this was a very natural overlap with analog horror. Five Nights at Freddy's is also a very lore-heavy game. YouTubers Grimpus McGrimpus took advantage of this depth of lore and loyal fan base to create a series referred to as the Five Nights at Freddy's VHS. The FNAF VHS series expanded on the lore from the games and did so through company tapes, shelved cartoons, and security footage. The series was hugely popular with Five Nights at Freddy's fans and has spawned its own subgenre of FNAF analog horror. If you search FNAF VHS, there's like hundreds of examples. It's very poppin'. 2019 saw one of the first truly collaborative analog horror projects, the Minerva Alliance, which was one of the first to include full voice acting. A lot of the earlier ones were just like text on screen, which really leaned into the anthology potential of analog horror, with each entry coming from a different creator, which I think was pretty cool as well. But the biggest year for analog horror was probably 2020, and this was likely due to the COVID-19 pandemic keeping people indoors and on YouTube more. You also saw a large crop of new analog horror entries as people were stuck indoors and realized that the only equipment that you really needed to create analog horror was a phone. Among this new round of entries, we got the Walton Files, which exists in the liminal space between general analog horror and FNAF VHS. It's another tale of haunted animatronics, but has its own distinct lore, history, and characters. There's the Monument Mythos, which appears like a series of documentaries charting an alternate history of the United States, where national monuments are covers for dark elder god entities. Another notable entry is Super Mario 64 Classified, which took many of the hallmarks of the second generation of analog horror and applied it to the haunted video game concept. So I was like, does this really qualify? Because it's like analog horror, but video games are digital. And the community consensus is that it does qualify because it's more of an aesthetic thing, like the aesthetics of analog technology, right? And nostalgia, and like the early generations of 3D games were all meant to be played on like CRT TVs, the same as like a VHS would have been. But the biggest entry in the post-pandemic analog horror sphere has to be the Mandela Catalog by Alex Kister. Have you watched that?
I have just a little bit, and then like when I didn't understand it, I went and looked for videos to watch about it.
Lore video.
Yeah.
he was 18 when he did that, so
that's insane.
Pretty crazy. Yeah. So the Mandela catalog is basically for the people who are uninitiated. It's a replicant horror story. There are malevolent alternates, doppelgangers, taking the places of ordinary people. In the series, the VHS tapes themselves are made suspect, as the creatures in the series are able to alter and change videos, so it's impossible to trust what you see. It also opens up what the series could sample and pull from, with imagery and clips ranging from police sketches of criminals to Bible cartoons for children to more standard found footage and security camera feeds. With Kane Parsons, the creator of a 2022 short called Backrooms, now slated to direct a feature-length film. Kane Parsons was also like 16 when he directed the Backrooms thing.
Crazy.
Yeah. We've also started to see mainstream film productions see the value and potential of analog horror. And so this more or less brings us up to speed. Many of the series that I've mentioned are ongoing. They're still going. The genre is developing. We've also seen a greater saturation of memes making fun of analog horror tropes, the spooky faces, the fact that a lot of them are like PowerPoint presentations, air raid sirens, like any genre with no barrier to entry. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of hacks out there. Speaking as a hack, but with us brought up to speed, what makes something analog horror? I cited a lot of examples. There's a lot of weird shit out there, right? We certainly have the focus on the past. What's interesting is that there are a lot of kids now in analog horror who were born in the 2000s, right? Alex Kister, the creator of Mandela Catalog, Kane Parsons, the creator of the Backrooms, they're both like teenagers, or they were teenagers when they started. And in these cases, wild. Yeah, right. It's like, you don't... Yeah, so like the nostalgia is not even like firsthand at this point, right? Like a lot of these kids probably didn't grow up watching VHSs. It's more like replicating like maybe your hazy early childhood memories. And eventually, I think we may see it kind of shift into like nostalgia for a past that they never experienced, that they never went through. And then on the other side, the nostalgia is updating. There are more series coming out with nostalgia for technology of the 2000s, right? Early internet and digital media kind of stuff. MySpace. But right, there's like, so there's like MySpace horror, like early Google kind of Angel Fire website horror out there now. God. But it's like, it's hard to say if this will be considered part of analog horror or if it will kind of develop into its own offshoot of like, early digital horror, millennial horror. I've heard some other, things thrown around, but focusing in on analog horror. Analog horror is often made with digital tools, but with the intention of appearing like it was a pre-digital creation. So the nostalgia factor is important. But as we discussed with Slenderman and the Cooper family photo, a lo-fi aesthetic can also effectively hide imperfections. Thinking back to Streetbox quote, the look of pre-digital forms of media does help viewers suspend their disbelief. A grainy tape may feel more believable, more visceral, because there is more left to the imagination to fill in. It's also worth noting that a lot of analog horror doesn't rely on gore for its scares. A fair share of analog horror feels more like watching a haunted video essay than a horror film, and that is sort of the point. The barrier to entry is very low. You can get away with just using images and text. With voice-to-text functions, you don't even need a microphone. Put some ambient noises, static, electric hums, maybe pull some samples from YouTube. Run it through a filter to make it look gritty, and if you're feeling extra spicy, you can get Blender, which is free, and make some VHS noise effects, and then you have the basic components of analog horror. And of course, putting those together doesn't mean it will be good, but it will be out there.
You will have made it.
You'll have made it. So it's about like a twisted form of nostalgia for a past that never existed. Whether it's invoking the feelings of waking up disoriented as an infomercial plays, or dusting off an unlabeled VHS you found tucked away in a closet, there's also a pervasive feeling of unreality. That analog horror, despite being low budget, is often very high concept. You're seeing relics from another timeline, one where the moon is a vengeful elder god, or there are alien life forms in the crawl space under your house, or James Dean was president. In this sense of unreality and the usual lack of characters, that makes analog horror effective as unfiction, because it places the viewer in the position as someone who found this mysterious footage. In some ways, this is more involved for viewers than other unfiction forms, which may tell a story they claim to be true, but often maintain distance by having the story happen to somebody else. Unfiction often functions like found footage, right? We watch, read, or hear what happens to the characters. We may be able to suspend disbelief and imagine these things really happened, but we are always removed from it. Analog horror can challenge that position by making the footage itself part of the horror. You become involved in the story because you have watched it. there's a lot more to be said about analog horror. This is just a high level overview, because for sure we will be getting into the nitty gritty of various series later.
Yeah.
But that's my intro to analog horror. Any questions?
Yeah. Very, very cool. I think the one that really gets me, because I hadn't realized, I know the names of the people who made it, and I didn't even conceptualize that it's like sometimes made by someone who doesn't have necessarily the firsthand experience of that moment. And then is like non-firsthand experiences and then nostalgia is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because like, damn.
Yeah, right. Like I think like when you like think about like the broadcast horror era, like that kind of Local 58 thing, like Chris Straub was saying, like he wanted people to feel like they woke up and there was like a government alert, right, playing, and you're like, oh shit, what's happening? Like that kind of like fear from like something is going on in the real world that's happening to you. Because like one of the first ones he did was like a government thing where it was like the government was telling people that the US had been invaded and everybody had to go out and like kill themselves, right?
It's very cool in terms of like unfiction is definitely like, I have seen really interesting ARGs that sometimes get in trouble for how believable it is,
right?
And it brings in like the creator. I think it was a while back I saw an ARG of this like person. They're just like, if you were not aware of it being an ARG, you would think that you're watching the YouTube channel of someone who's kind of like falling into their own mind, going a little wild, like, and then some people were believing it, and then like it led to like the cops being called on this person because they said they had like weapons and they're going to like harm themselves, or like this person's university being called because they're like, hey, look at the stuff that this person's like doing online, like they're threatening to da da da. So I think there is some like, in terms of like adding the credits to these things, like of course it does pull away from like, you want this to be believable, this is an anonymously created thing, but like adding a name to it being created, I think helps towards like tackling unreality and unfiction, especially for those who are like people who struggle with the concept of unreality, just like the Matrix issue, right? That kind of thing. So I think that it could be like definitely like adding your name to something that like gets reposted so many times, like it gets like beaten down, like who made this, you could look it up, but it's kind of hard to figure it out. But also like some maybe like a sense of like responsibility to be like chill. Like if this is someone who's consuming this and then they're telling people about it, you can be like, oh, this is not real, let me just like, here's the creator of it, like kind of like sense of responsibility of like stopping that potential like unreality feeling. I was definitely thinking about like, I think that is like, it feels to me a little bit more responsible. I mean, obviously we're recording this in 2023. We've had like we've seen the full range of effects of like somebody LARPing on 4chan in 2017. Yes.
That turned into an insurrection on the US Capitol in a few years because people, I mean, that is like the dangers of like unfiction. There is like elements, there's a lot of like kind of conspiracy thinking in like analog horror. But to me, I feel like it maybe is like a healthier outlet if it is like, no, don't worry. I made this. I made this up. It's a story. You can get lost in the world. You can have a lot of fun here, but it's a story. Like James Dean was not president. You know, you don't need to worry about like monsters hiding in Mount Rushmore. And that was the thing for me for when it comes to like the monument mythos, where it's like some people do have like, and you kind of sit there and like, why would anyone believe that? But like, you know, the big horse at the airport, people have like beliefs about that, like that the Denver airport kind of stuff.
So it's like, I think there's a sense of responsibility in putting your name to it and saying this is outright like fiction. Because on the BuzzFeed Unsolved channel, like a while back, one of the guys got like in trouble, I guess, because he like posted like, videos. It's like, oh, my friend is missing, and I've been compiling and here's a link to go to. And some people were like, oh no, because he had like I think it's like Aria. He had like a history of doing like crime, like documentary kind of stuff. So everyone was like, it is a little bit unresponsible for someone who is known for doing like deep dives on crimes kind of thing to post this without saying that it's an ARG, because people will believe you and then do stuff. So it was like, it ended up being taken down. It's kind of like, the firsthand experience nostalgia, non-firsthand thing really got me, but also like the sense of like adding your name to it because you want your credit, but also maybe like to say, stop, like this was fake. Yeah. I made this, my mind. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's important. I think the nostalgia factor, I mean, like in terms of it being like a very hauntological genre, it's obviously all very influenced by nostalgia and like the levels of abstraction that we're reaching in like the culture of nostalgia and in like that hauntological like resistance towards finding new forms, but then like the new forms that are being created are still directly referential to the old forms. Or like, yeah, I think it's interesting that like one of the biggest forms of online storytelling is recreating things that were around in like the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, it's very, it's cat time. But yeah, another point that really I think additionally makes this interesting is like low barrier to entry, right? Like you said, like a phone, like every phone has the camera, the recording. You can get it onto your computer fast. Like if you are like an Apple person, you have access to like GarageBand. If you are just a software like PC, whatever kind of person, you have access to Audacity, which is where a lot of like early podcasts were being made from, right? If you're familiar with like Welcome to Night Vale, for a long time, that was like Audacity, right? A microphone, very easy to have now. Post pandemic, everyone has like a Yeti or whatever, right? You don't have to have a fancy. Sometimes even the earphone mics, right? This is Skull Candy. Like this is good for like analog horror. Like it adds to having like the rustling kind of thing, right? Low barrier to entry is really cool in terms of like democratization of the creation of these kinds of things.
For sure. Like, have you seen Backrooms? But like Kane Barson's Backrooms?
No.
I would recommend that. Like, if you're listening to this, everybody check that out. It's like 10 minutes. It's super tight. There's like no fat on it. It's very, I mean, it's like very much, it's like a found footage thing. It's like the guy falls into the back rooms and spends 10 minutes wandering around, and it's, you know, it's creepy. He's being chased by a thing. But it's like, he made it in Blender. You can get Blender for free. You can teach yourself how to make Blender, how to make these environments. And again, back to like the technology thing, like having the effect like it was being filmed on a camcorder really kind of hides. Because if it's Blender and you're just seeing like it's straight up, like how crisp it is, how the lines are, you're like, ugh, like you're just walking around like a weird like CGI room.
Yeah.
But like having the camcorder effect makes it like believable enough that you're like, oh shit, like this, like it just obscures things so effectively in a way that's like, again, it's not like hard to add that once you've already built the environment to add like the static effect, but it is like effective. It does like add to it. Yeah.
The grit, the messiness of it makes it even more believable, which is very cool. Yeah. This does remind me, and I did not even realize it until now, of a little podcast called Tapes from the Road. And it is, the concept of it is you are someone listening to it, and these are dated random cassette tapes of a young girl going through a sort of virus issue in all over the US, and you're basically finding yourself listening through her days, and it's supposed to be like a cassette tape thing, right? Every episode starts with the sound of a cassette tape being put into a tape player kind of thing, and then you get like the errors of like skipping dialogue kind of thing. And Tapes from the Road was made by me. And I had not even connected that to analog horror. I was just like, what is the best, easiest way to make this kind of thing? Right. You're like happening upon this thing that's happening, and like, what's a good, effective way to tell a story that is believably like you just found this thing and you're listening to it now. Right. I did not think I don't think I was aware of analog horror of it at the time. I knew of analog horror, but I think that at that time, analog horror wasn't like the big word, but also like it was just like found foot. It was found footed for me. So then I was like, oh, this is found audio.
Yeah.
Right. And when I was making it, and in terms of like how defining like analog horror, it was like you had the whole like nostalgia, a low barrier to entry, like a twisted form of nostalgia, unreality, unfiction, and then digital tools with the intention of making it look vintage, sound vintage, right? I used Audacity for that. I had Logic Pro to kind of make things sound a little gritty, sketchy, right? I was pulling sounds from, I was literally recording on the ferry sometimes to get the max sound of like people talking, the rushing sounds of the water kind of thing. So it's like, having that defined as like a thing makes me realize that like that podcast was like analog horror, and
fits in the genre. I think that's the thing, is it doesn't have to be like a conscious choice to be like, I'm going to make a piece of analog horror. Like it is like a very effective way of doing things, where you can be like, this is like added parts of it, right? Like where like you're saying, like the environmental recording, like you could have, did you record that? How did you record it? Did you have like a portable recorder, or were you just recording on your phone? Like,
I was recording on my laptop, and then I had like, I'm a sound person, so I have equipment. Like you don't need that kind of thing. I could have recorded it on my phone as well, but I had a H4n that was like going on. Like when I was walking through the city, I would have the recorder on so I could capture like legit people walking, the sounds of like running kind of thing. So I had the fancy equipment, but I was making it sound nasty.
Right.
Kind of thing. Because it makes it a little bit more believable. Because, right, like you could hear clips of people going like, oh, I'm going to lunch here, da-da-da. But when I muffle it, it's just like, but then you hear running, right? And it's like, for me, when I was making that, it was like, what is like a weird thing? If imagine if we all, and the reason why I stopped it was because we had a family emergency, but also like, because I was like, oh, I don't think I really want to make and continue a podcast about an epidemic where people start losing their like ability to have empathy, and they're just harming each other on the streets. I don't think I want to make that in 2020 and pick it up. So I had to reach out to like everyone who was on the show. I was like, guys, like this happened, but also like I don't think any of us are in the headspace to be making something similar to that. And aspects of it were also like, she's just telling you a story, but also like recorded conversations between her and other people. And then one specific way that I had to like date those things, or like to update you without the character immediately telling you, was I used like someone who's like broadcasting from the Coit Tower, right? So I had a radio announcer on the show, like to directly tell you what was happening, kind of thing. So it was like that kind of thing. But it's interesting how that was fairly easy to make, and how you could get people on it in an easy way. So there's like a low barrier to entry kind of thing. But yeah, it's very interesting. That got me thinking. I literally was sitting here. I was like, Tapes from the Road is fucking.
Yeah, you're part of this.
You can still listen to it. It is available. It's just been discontinued. But the thing is, where it stopped, it is completely fine to say that it stopped there, because it was going to get a little crazy. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to get like the first wave, the second wave of it, and then what like I would be looking forward to what comes of digital millennial horror, and then thinking about like those alerts that we get on our phone for like earthquakes or emergency things. And I'm like, how would that then, that's digital horror new, right? Like how does that, what is the digital horror of our time coming soon?
Right. Yeah. Like the kids that are kids today will probably, when they start creating YouTube videos in like the next 10 years, they'll have like, whoa, what about doing like when we got the phone messages from like the president, if we're still alive in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
But like, but yeah, I mean, like the nostalgia factor, I think is very interesting, because I think like a big part of analog horror, a lot of this, it was like kind of nostalgia. The nostalgia factor was there for like people like Chris Straub, where he was like, I wanted to recreate this feeling of waking up in the middle of the night, leaving the TV on, and just being like disoriented. And that was like like what's his name? John Carpenter said the same thing about like why he wanted to create Videodrome was like because when he was a kid, he had like an aerial on his house and he would like turn the aerial and like find signals of like weird TV stations from like around. And then like and then he was like, oh, what if I see something really scary, you know, really dark? Like there is like that childhood element of it. And on the TV broadcast side, I think there is like, it's a different way of interacting with media that we don't experience anymore, right? Mm-hmm. Or like when you talk to like somebody that's like a kid now, they maybe don't have like the experience of like finding something on TV and not being able to pause it.
Yeah.
And it's like you're in this different way of experiencing media where you're more passive, but also kind of more powerless. Like all you can do is like turn it off or change the channel. You can't like, oh, fuck, this is pause. Like that's a different experience with media. But again, now it's getting more abstracted where like the people that are making kind of analog horror entries now maybe didn't grow up with that style of television, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then thinking about like the Max Headroom example, right? Mm-hmm. Where like you said that like when we consumed TV as young people, like if something like fucked up happened on TV, like you can't necessarily like rewind it unless you had like one of those fancy like DVR kind of things where like if there was like a blip on TV, you're just like, what the fuck just happened? Like, I can't be like, cause so it becomes a thing at school the next day. Like, did anyone see that? Was anyone like DVRing it or like some kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's very interesting in terms of like, I think, and also in like in terms of like scariness where, right, like if that happened to us, like that's scary in that moment, we can't revisit it, we'll be thinking about it for days. But like analog horror, you have the ability for like these kinds of things on like especially on YouTube to rewind. If you're on your phone, you can like really zoom into a thing, like analyze those kinds of things, right? And how it's interesting how that in some of those cases it's still scary, right? Because I can talk for days about like I pause this thing is like it's no longer scary, right? Video game monsters effectivity and like showing the monster on screen effectivity. But some of these, like even if you pause it, like the longer you stare at it, it does get scary. Like all of these things, the one that scared me the most, that's why I kind of like stopped watching it just for a bit, was Mandela Catalog, because I was getting like the faces that were like shifting and changing, and some of like the things that I was reading, I was like, this is like legitimately scary. I paused it and I hate looking at it, like, but my eyes want to look at it some more.
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting how like sometimes the ability to pause on these things, you intake more information and then it gets scarier.
Yeah. I think we're in a different, it's an interesting blend of like how we consume media now, but using like kind of replicating and evoking the feeling of how we used to consume media.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a cool blend.
It's very interesting. And then like now you kind of sort of examine how like if you were a kid these days, like how do you consume these things? And then like is like the believability of it as like a child. Like obviously you like you can suspend your disbelief. You'd be like, that's not how VHSs work. Like but then you're also like, what if? That kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Very cool, Ben, and I'm very interested to see what ones
getting back into it.
Yeah, because oh my god, like the old school example, like War of the Worlds, definitely I know, and then the Ghostwatch one, I remember. But I've seen videos of like the after effects of it, of like people genuinely being fucking scared and like calling, be like, my kid couldn't fucking sleep for days, and then and then the War of the Worlds thing, you know, you read about how like people reacted to that,
lose their fucking mind.
Because I cannot imagine being back then and all of a sudden the radio that I trust to get everything off of is like, we're getting fucking attacked. I'd be like, well, I mean, I was gonna die anyway. Might as well.
I mean, I think that it's an interesting thing. I mean, overall, I think we've kind of lost a lot of trust in media for some good reasons. And again, like back to like that thinking about like the conspiracy elements of analog horror and like kind of as like a good like pressure vent, I think maybe. Like it's good to have like that thing where it's like, like, fuck the government. Like obviously, but not in like they're not, you know, satanic pedophiles that are trying to suck adrenochrome from your children.
Right.
Like there's actual things going on. Like there's like the elements of like disambiguating between what is fiction and what is not fiction, I think is important, because like in the world of unfiction, you can kind of like elevate your story to the same level as like a fact. And I think that is like sometimes dangerous. When you're like, this story that I'm making up, I want people to experience this the same way that they would something that is actually happening and being documented.
Taking on that additional responsibility. Right. And responsibility, the thing we talk about a lot here, even if it's like indirect, of like impacts of what a story has sort of created in someone's mind, right? We have like the Slenderman issue, we have some of the Ben Drown issue, we have Momo Bird issue, we have the clown phenomenon. It's like getting to that sort of level of hype and well-knownness, awareness for like everybody about it. It's like there's like a responsibility also, just, and it sucks that you have to have the responsibility of saying like, it's not real, please help, like I made it, kind of thing.
I mean, like, that's like the nice thing though, is like it could be so simple. You can just put your name at the very end of the video and be like, I made this, it's a game, it's fun, I'm having fun. Be scared when you're watching it, and then like that's it.
Unplug from it, right?
Go back to reality.
Okay, you don't want to put it in the beginning of like, this was inspired by that, because like, you know, some stories, some movies are like that, but then you get to the end and go, hey, this was created by, written by, produced by, kind of thing. Just like a sense of like, you want people to believe it, but also like, you know, like step back, like you're good, you're okay. Bad things are happening in the world, but not this one. This is not reality. It's fine, and that's fine. Like Chris Drop said, it's fiction is allowed to be fiction. Things don't have to be reality to be scary. It's like sometimes you need a fictional thing to scare you, to pull you away from the real things that scare you sometimes, because then you can say, I've turned that off and I'm not scared of it anymore, or it scares me but only in this specific case. We did some analog horror today.
We did. Juice jacking to analog horror.
Juice jacking that analog horror stuff. That's that Michael's secret stuff. Everybody watch Space Jam right now, the original one, please.
Everybody go listen to Tapes from the Road.
Oh God, you're gonna hear how young my voice was back then, and it was less cracky. But yeah, Tapes from the Road, right? Okay, but this episode, this one right here, was written and produced by Ben and JD. For all our sources, please head to the website in the description down below. If you'd like to reach out with a comment, a suggestion, or share an experience with one of our topics today, yell at me about Five Nights at Freddy's and what I said about it, send us a message at iscreamyoumeme@gmail.com. All music for the podcast is provided by Jaeger Frank. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next epi.